Welcome back to Rank and File Sports, where we are grading every single NFL draft class based on three categories. First of all, we're going to grade based off of whether or not the team drafted the players that fit their needs for next season, as well as the overall talent that they got, just assessing the draft class as a whole. And then finally, the value. Is each player worth where they were drafted at? Were they a steal at that position, or did the team maybe reach a little bit and not get as good a value as they could have if they had traded the pick? And then after that, we're going to go ahead and give them an overall grade. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the video.
Saints going into this draft after a pretty disappointing season in the NFC South needed a wide receiver, cornerback, edge rusher, offensive guard, and a quarterback. And in the first round, with the ninth overall pick, they took Kelvin Banks Jr., an offensive tackle from Texas. I really liked this pick. While they didn't necessarily need an offensive tackle, talent-wise, he is phenomenal. While technically a reach by the overall ranking standards, the top two offensive tackles went prior to him. Josh Simmons was drafted later, and while technically he might have been ranked ahead of him, Josh Simmons is coming off an injury, so I can understand why they took Kelvin Banks Jr. over those other offensive tackles. But I really like this pick. While they do need a guard, just bolstering the trenches there, making sure you're able to keep up with the solid edge rushers the NFC South has to offer. I think this is an incredible pick for them talent-wise.
Yeah, I think Kelvin Banks he's going to turn out to be a really good pick. The second round pick, this one really left me questioning a lot of stuff. Tyler Shuff. He was in college for a very long time. This guy, he's too old to be a long-term starter for the Saints. So I don't know why you would spend a second round pick on him. Funny enough, uh his professional comp is Joe Flacco. Not quite as old as Flacco, but definitely getting up there. I think that Shedeur Sanders is probably better than Schuff. Will Howard is better than Schuff. They could have gone so many different ways. They could have waited 3 rounds before drafting a quarterback because of how far both of those guys fell. Really just didn't make a ton of sense to me here. Schuff, because he has so much starting experience in college, there's a good chance the Saints do okay this year, but they're going to need a long-term guy, and I really just don't think Schuff is that guy.
Yeah, he definitely has potential to have some success in a few coming years. But like you said, long-term wise, might not be the answer they're looking for. Maybe that's what their intention is. They didn't want to draft someone like Shitter Sanders or Will Howard because they want someone next year in a quarterback class that is being talked about a lot more. But in that case, like you said, I would have waited and I would have taken someone that actually met their needs because I believe like Siobhan Revel at corner was available. Will Johnson was available. They had other wide receiver options, edge options, and a very deep edge class as well. So definitely a questionable pick here. Third round, they reached a little bit to get a defensive tackle and Vernon Broughton from Texas. Very large man, 6'5", 311 pounds, and definitely is going to plug those trenches and it's going to have a nice battle against, once again, a very solid offensive line division in the NFC South. But once again, for not being a direct need that they're meeting, does kind of leave me questioning why they're reaching for someone like Vernon Broughton instead of getting an edge rusher that they could get in, once again, a very deep class.
Yeah, next pick going to be Jonas Sanker out of Virginia. This one turned out to be pretty good value. He was projected to be, around mid to late third, right where they got him. So I think that overall, it's going to turn out pretty well. He's a top five safety in the class, and I think he's definitely going to be able to see some playing time this year, maybe get into the rotation. And overall, this is going to be just a really valuable third round pick for the Saints.
Absolutely. Definitely one of the most talented players they've gotten so far. Fourth round, they took Danny Stutzman, a linebacker from Oklahoma. And again, while it doesn't address a need, very talented player, has a lot of potential both as a pass rusher and as a coverage back. So I think this is, once again, it's just getting very talented players to fill some positions. And granted, they probably still needed linebacker or some other defensive positions. But once again, because some of the other needs had such deep classes, I'm surprised I didn't take an edge rusher here or a wide receiver here or a cornerback.
Yeah, the next pick though, they did finally address the cornerback position, and they got Quincy Riley. This ended up being a very good value pick. It's a little bit on the shorter side at 5'11", but still, I think it's going to turn out okay. I would have liked to see them address corner a little bit earlier than the late fourth round, but they still got a guy that's pretty good value. He definitely fell a ways, so it didn't turn out terrible. But there's been a few questionable decisions with this Saints draft class, in my opinion.
Yeah, especially with the fact that, like you said, Quincy Riley is 5'11", and now he has to deal with Tedero McMillan and Mike Evans twice a year, and he's gonna get head tapped every single time he's lined up with them just because the height difference is so big. Sixth round rolls around, and they take Devin Neal, running back from Kansas. Again, another incredible valuable pick, but they don't need a running back. They have Alvin Kamara, and while yes, he may have some injury concerns, he's still relatively young and one of the most productive backs in the entire league. Again, they didn't have a draft an edge rusher to this point. They didn't draft an offensive guard. They didn't draft a wide receiver. I can understand taking valuable players or talented players, but you still have to meet the needs before you can start doing that. They've only met two needs up until this point, and one of them, both of them actually, were questionable draft picks. So great for Devin Neal to get drafted, but still questions for this pick by the Saints.
Yeah, the next one also not addressing a need late in the seventh round, grabbing Moliki Matavo from UCLA at tight end. And again, I do you really need a tight end? I I guess late in the seventh round, it's kind of just grabbing the best available guys. Um, Not really a ton of value left at the positions that they need. Kind of just figuring they'll fill those with undrafted free agents or something. But I don't know about this one either.
Yeah, a little bit questionable, especially with a guy like Juwan Johnson in your lineup, who's a little bit more of a deep threat. Then our prayers have finally been answered. The Saints drafted an edge rusher with their last pick of the draft, taking Fadil Diggs, who is a Texas A&M transfer to Syracuse. Did lead Syracuse in sacks and tackles for loss, but the production didn't match the tape as much. Again, with a draft class of edge rushers that was very deep, I'm a little disappointed that the Saints didn't draft any of them earlier. They could have gotten someone like JTT in the second or third round, probably. And again, I'm just kind of surprised. Overall, a little disappointed with this draft class.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like we've been hinting at the whole time, the Saints didn't really address their needs overall, and they didn't do it as early as they should have. This is going to get a C from us for the needs. And then talent-wise, I think Kelvin Banks Jr., 100%, he's the most talented player in this draft class. Quincy Riley, not bad. Devin Neal, solid running back. They're going to get a C plus though. I mean, they have a lot of just, I would say, average players here. And it's not a terrible draft class. You got a bunch of guys that are all average players, and hopefully some of them will pan out for the Saints. And then value wise, we're also going to go C plus. Technically, Kelvin Banks Jr. was a reach, but we're not going to count it as one just because he's a really, really solid offensive tackle. And I don't know how much longer he would have lasted if they didn't take him at 9. But I really don't like the Tyler Shuff pick. And a lot of these other guys were also reaches. Again, value wise, they're not addressing their needs. So it's going to be a C plus here. This is going to come out to a total of a C plus for the Saints.
Yeah, I kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit earlier. Started off with some okay picks. Kelvin Banks Jr., like you said, great pick, very talented. Tyler Shuff could work in the short term, but long term, I don't really see that panning out. Then everything after that just either didn't address a need or addressed a need by either reaching or waiting way too long to draft someone. Quincy Riley, even though he was a steal at what they picked him at, I don't think was the best corner they could have gotten. I think Tyler Shuff, same thing. Definitely could have got a better quarterback and they could have waited longer to do so. So overall, like I said, a little disappointed in this draft class from the Saints. Still could pan out. There's a lot of potential here, a lot of guys that could make their impact happen on this team, but only time will tell. We'll see if how many of these players are able to work their way into the lineups in this season, but that is a topic for another video. So make sure to like and subscribe so you can catch all of our videos, including more NFL draft grades, and we will see you in the next one.